So,
Hello, are we live?
yep.
Hi, my name is Simon McQueen. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the panel. I'm the CEO of Brainwork Business Consulting, and we're here live in Canada, Portugal, and Brazil with our partners. And I'll introduce the partners quickly. We've got CyberMe, Global Startups, Doug BR, Level Group, Centennial College, and we're here today to discuss a fundamental shift in how AI is transforming the way that software development is processed and secured. So I'm going to start with a quick introduction by JP from Global Startups. Everybody, please welcome JP.
Thank you so much, Simon, for the introduction. And yeah, happy to host Brainwork and the guys at Level Academy, Centennial, Cybertech, CyberMe, Doug. Doug? Is it Doug? Yes.
Doug, yeah.
Doug. And yeah, we're happy to host them. And at Global, we help international startups soft land their businesses here in Canada. So if you want a soft land in Canada, please reach out. And yeah, I just wanted to have this brief introduction so you know where the event is hosted here at the core of downtown Toronto. Welcome, everyone. Thank you, Simon, and everyone here present in person and all over the world.
Thank you, JP. And we also have Walter Freitas joining us from Sao Paulo to speak representing Level Group. Walter, great to see you.
Hi, Simon. Nice to talk to you and everybody who is attending this webinar. I'm talking from Level, which is a Brazil company, a basic company over the last 19 years. And we also run a EdTech focus on development of supply chain professionals, which is named Level Academy. And we have a strong partnership with Brainwork. And I appreciate this opportunity and count on us. We are talking from our headquarters at São Paulo, and we are very proud to participate on this event. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Walter. So we'll dive into it. As people here around the table and who are joining us from around the world are probably aware, AI is really transforming fairly recently, but fairly rapidly, the way that secure software development transpires within organizations and companies. It accelerates software development. It enables engineers to deliver features more rapidly. But however, while it can identify security vulnerabilities and generate substantial code, it may also introduce unsafe code and significant maintenance challenges. In this session, we do want to talk about how to keep code secure when human ideas and AI-generated code are closely combined. Using AI well requires strong human oversight. As every other utilization of AI in today's world, keeping a human in the loop, or more than in the loop, with strong oversight is critical. So today's developers have to shift from simply writing code by hand to also managing AI tools, verifying their results, setting clear trust limits, and supporting a secure by design approach. As people say these days, every company is a technology company. So this is something that impacts people across sectors, across the world, and across industries. And so on a bit of a personal aside, I'm really happy to see the way this has come together. We've got people live in Toronto, we've got people live in Porto, live in Sao Paulo, and online throughout the world. I know we have people in different time zones in Canada. We have people who couldn't make it in Sao Paulo because they're in other parts of Brazil. They're live from everywhere. So as somebody who really values international collaboration, this is amazing for me to see. So I thank everybody for being able to come in person and online. And one of the things I really hope that we can do with this panel is to not only stimulate really interesting conversations about AI DevSecOps, but hopefully people who on the panel and people who have joined as guests can engage in really meaningful conversations even beyond this panel. We've got an hour, and we've got some really good questions for our panelists. But I know for everybody joining, we've spoken with the panelists in advance, and they'd be more than happy to connect with you later to continue these conversations. So please, at the end, you're going to see an opportunity. You can reach out to them on LinkedIn and connect. They're going to be more than happy to do that. So please keep that in mind, because the way we've done this is we've designed questions, and we're going to be asking the panelists individually, just so that we can manage time. But for the other panelists, please, if I ask a question to one of you and you want to add something, please feel free to do that. We want to generate something like a conversation. We'll just have to be a little bit mindful of the time. And at the end, we're also going to have time for questions from the audience. So if while the panelists are talking and they say something provocative or something that you really would like to ask about, follow-up questions, please just jot them down. Or if you're joining online, I think there's a chat you can send questions to, and then we'll pick those at the end. So without further ado, and by the way, I'm going to be introducing our panelists very briefly, like 1 or 2 sentences. But again, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Our panelists have really deep expertise in their fields. And so if you go to their LinkedIn profiles, you'll be able to see more and connect with them and start a conversation beyond what we're doing today. So without further ado, I'm going to do some really brief introductions, and then we'll move to the questions. So from Portugal, we have Alan Borges. I don't know, Alan, if you want to raise, there we go. That's him there with his hand up. Alan's a tech entrepreneur with over 30 years of experience, having held leadership roles in large companies such as Atos and IBM. As an entrepreneur, Alan's founded companies with operations in Brazil and Portugal, where he's joining us from now. Technology companies focus on managing cybersecurity services, professional training, and cybersecurity. We also have, to his immediate right, Thiago Vieira, who is a specialist in cybersecurity, digital law, and forensic investigation. With a career built at the intersection of technology, justice, and the protection of society in a world increasingly vulnerable to digital risk. He's created several companies with an international presence in the United States and Portugal. He's also an angel investor in technological solutions focused on digital protection and resilience. Welcome, Thiago. We have people joining us from Brazil. Igor, I can see you down. You are online, right, Igor? Experienced software engineer with extensive knowledge of cloud security, and the container industry. International speaker in Latin American and European events. Thank you so much for joining us, Igor. And Professor Paulo Pejocci, also in Brazil. He's an honorary member of the National Association of Data Protection Professionals, lead auditor and certified offensive cybersecurity professor. He's a member of the International Relations and Privacy and Data Protection Commission of Sao Paulo Bar Association. Pejocci, welcome. And here live in Toronto, to my right, we have Brian Atkinson. Brian is a senior human capital leader with over 25 years of progressive experience internationally and domestically. He's currently the Associate Dean of Business Management Studies at Centennial College, and has previously held senior roles at Capital One, CIBC, Bombardier, and more. So thank you so much for joining us in person, Brian. So like I said, I'm going to get to some questions for each individual panelist. Feel free to jump in if anybody else wants to. And I'm going to start with Igor in Sao Paulo. As AI models are trained on vast amounts of content, much of which may contain vulnerabilities, how do you ensure your AI isn't just replicating the internet's worst security mistakes into enterprise codebase?
Awesome. First of all, thank you all for the opportunity for being here. It's a pleasure. And I was actually discussing this a while ago with a couple of friends. And the way I see this is that the real big change we have here is that now with AI, the amount of code we can produce, the amount of infrastructure, the amount of software in general that we can produce has increased a lot, right? But when we think about security, especially on the vulnerability space, by the way, I'm a senior software engineer here at Orca Security. I work for a company that does cloud security in general, so I'm part of this space. The real challenge that we see hasn't changed much. The idea is you need to have gates, you need to have blocks in your pipeline, you need to have a tool that can scan your environment looking for vulnerabilities. But the real thing that has changed is the amount of code and software that we can produce. So now with AI, a single software engineer can produce, instead of, let's say, and I know this is not a good measure, but just for the sake of the example, a senior software engineer could have been producing, let's say, 1,000 lines of code per week, right? Before AI, before the GPT era. But now a senior software engineer can produce 10 times that, can produce 100 times that. So now all the security gateways that you must have, they are even more needed, right? Because if just doing a quick math here, each time we deploy 1,000 lines of code, we also have vulnerability. Imagine that now producing 10 times that, 100 times that, we will also produce 10 times more vulnerability and also maybe 100 times more vulnerabilities. So the idea is to use the same placeholders, the same gateways you had before, with like security tooling scanning your pipeline, security tooling scanning your production environment, looking for vulnerabilities. And also, what has also changed a lot with AI is a metric that we calculate and we speak a lot in the vulnerability space, which is the time to exploit. So let's say in 2005 or 2010, the time to exploit, which is how much time it takes from when the vulnerability was disclosed until someone can actually create a vulnerability out of it, this time has been shrinking a lot. Especially now, you guys probably heard about the new Cloud model called Mythos, right? Which was released just for a couple companies. And this model speaks a lot about this, because running this model for just a couple hours, I believe, I don't remember on top of my mind, but running this model only for a couple hours, the researchers were able to discover a lot of vulnerabilities that would take like maybe years or even multiple days and months to really have a vulnerability exploitable. Now it can be done in really seconds or minutes. So this has also changed a lot. And this again bring the same conversation to the table. We need to have pipeline blocking stuff. We need to have security tooling analyze the environment. And I will finish saying that in the same way that AI helps a lot the good guys, right? People like ourselves, software engineers and all of that, to create stuff, to build more stuff, to build more software. It also helps a lot the bad guys, right? They also are capable to use AI to ask ChatGPT, craft me a vulnerability exploit or something like that. So for me, those are the two biggest changes that happened in the vulnerability space after the AI era. And this is just the beginning. It will change a lot more.
Yeah, so there's always been the sort of fear or the awareness with AI that, you know, the garbage in, garbage out. But now you're saying that it's important with the attack surface has been broadened and the time that it takes for attacks to be initiated and data exploited. You just have to be that much more alert.
Yes.
And set up all the right tools and processes.
Right. And also this thing about garbage in, garbage out, right? I think that really happened, that really happened in the beginning. So for example, I believe in 2021, 2022, the models were created in a different way, and they were mainly focused on having more data and not exactly about having the best data, you know. But now I think this is also changing, because personally, I have seen a shift on the quality of the code that's produced by these tools. And honestly, in my opinion, now as I said, I'm a senior software engineer here, but my work is really focused on selling the Orca solution for people. I don't produce software in my daily base for my company, but I do have a lot of open source projects that I contribute. I do have a lot of stuff that I do outside of my work. And honestly, I have been producing all my code, at least in the last 3-4 months, using purely AI. You know, there's of course a lot of good practice here using, I don't know, spec-driven development, where you really speak with the AI before jumping into the code. There's a lot of good practice, but honestly, I have seen a lot of increase in the quality of these models, and I think they are now also changing to make sure, for example, they simply do not use a huge amount of data, but also they use the proper data. I think that all the companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, they are focusing more on the quality of the product, because now we have a lot of different models. So creating a LLM model is not, it's a commodity right now, right? Pretty much everyone can create a LLM. Of course, it's not that simple, but I think the models will start to shift more and more to be more focused on quality and less on quantity of data, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. I'm going to switch over to Portugal now, and Alan. So what do you do if part of your team is using AI, as Gord just explained, to build fast microservices, while other parts of your team are stuck maintaining old legacy systems? How do you unify your DevSecOps culture so that the legacy team isn't left behind and you don't have sort of these silos happening within your organization?
Well, first of all, thank you all to attending this meeting. That's a pleasure to be here. Well, that's on my understanding, a leadership challenge that needs to be taken in consideration, because probably in my experience, I had a chance to work with a lot of legacy systems and see the transitions to the cloud security and microservices, Kubernetes, and so on. So basically, is to, on my understanding, to keep and to create a policy, a common policy, a common goal for the security behaviors or security development, right? So that's being said, but more about the human factor of the house. So we know that on the modern and AI development, we have a couple of automations, a couple of solutions going back and forth, and sometimes the development teams get a little bit confused about what should I implement. Should I go through an open source solution? Should I go to a vendor solution? How can I integrate that? How can I monitor that? How can I keep tracking and audit that? And that being said, when we are talking about monolithic and the other sort of, for example, in my experience in the mainframes as well, we have a sort of development, but we are talking about much more about culture. So how can we implement that culture? So the leadership is the one who could direct this effort, but it's pretty mandatory to keep the teams trained and aware about these policies and about the culture. We're not talking about culture, we're talking about people. So mainly the development or the developers, they should be aware about what they are doing and how they could be doing. So get and create a bridge between these legacy systems and the modern systems is something very challenging, but it's something possible in order that you can integrate these with a common training. And of course, that the approaches sounds a little bit different within these teams, but mainly the security champions, which are persons who can empower and making the awareness of how we implement security development best practices on the CI and CD environments could make it all different. And of course, that when we are talking about such a kind of technologies and teams, one size fits all does not fit, right? So it's something impractical. So each company, each leader needs to evaluate, to do a very a very good assessment on their environment and identify the proper people and the proper resources and tools in order to develop and to create a culture of a security development. Tiago, would like to add something?
Yes. Alan's already summarized pretty much what is happening, and it's pretty much the same problem that we have in not just in coding, not just in AI, the SecOps. We have this problem in the entire use of AI, the entire ecosystem of AI use, which is basically the critical thinking, right? People are not thinking anymore. So AI now is making people to be lazy, start to be confident much, and so we have, and this links with what Alan was saying about leadership, and it's also and going a little further with what we're going to discuss next, but I think it's very related with also accountability. But because people are not willing to take decisions anymore, people are afraid to take decisions, and people are willing to pay to someone who takes the accountability, right? And most of the startups are making a lot of money because someone is saying, hey, if you pay to me, I will handle everything if something bad happens. And people are looking to find a guilty one, someone to blame. And I think this is one of the problems. And we are talking about people, we're talking about teams, talking about building this leadership, building this culture. So we also need to think about how we can solve this problem, which is what is happening not just in developer teams, but also all the sectors that are using AI in the world now, which is the soft skills, right? How we can engage with this, and also think about the humanity of this, and start to thinking that only the machines will solve the problem, and we forget about that we have a brain, and we also need to take this into consideration and put in the equation. So I really think that we have other sources that we need to also bring out together. It's not easy, of course, because otherwise we would already solve everything. But I think the way is that we go through this training of culture and bringing these topics to the table. And these problems actually we had before AI, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think most people just forgot to discuss these problems, and now they are just thinking about AI, but they forgot that the base is lacking something that we forgot to continue, right? Because AI now is the big.
And if you allow me, when we were talking about monolithic or legacy systems, or we probably will have a senior developers working on that on the old way, but what they have in an advent of the current teams or the modern teams is the communication skills, as Thiago said very well. So it's something that we need to pay attention at, because of course that AI, as Igor has just said, can produce thousands and thousands of lines. But I mean, how can we integrate everything where it doesn't matter the team that we are talking to create a sense of a team building approach? So I mean, everything that is related to the dev and the SecOps and the security should not be a barrier or something to slow down the development, but it's something that adds security at the end of the top. Because I mean, AI definitely creates a new level of measures of vulnerabilities and so on, so fast that we need to definitely create a culture. So have the proper policies, the proper procedures in place in order to everyone which is aware when we have an onboard of a new developer or someone new to the team, to be welcome, to understand the company policies, the company culture. So, well, that's I am, Thiago, agree definitely on that. The human spotlights on that matter. So we definitely need to get the best of that.
Yeah, thank you. So a lot to unpack there. I hope people were taking notes in case they have questions. But for sure, I think it emphasizes the need for even the leadership who don't necessarily have a technical background, which I may or may not be one of those people, to at least become somewhat literate with how the technology is evolving so that they can properly set the culture. But then again, I know the human skills is a term that people are using a lot these days. And I think that integrating those two is really important, as you've both said. So yeah, Thiago, my next question for you, I mean, this dovetails into it very nicely, because I was going to ask you about, as Igor said, AI is writing cleaner and cleaner code by the day, right? So it's getting better and it's becoming so much faster that maybe this sort of breeds a bit of complacency. And so what do you do to prevent that and ensure that teams really do stay actively engaged and reviewing and testing and making sure that things don't go awry?
Well, first of all, I really want to go back to the point that we were talking before, is that when you are building teams, we also need to think that we need to establish the roles of each one, because most of the times people are lost. They don't know what they are doing. They don't have guidelines. They don't have policies, like Alan was saying. So I think the first thing, and I always like the word of aligning expectations. When we are talking with people, I really believe that we need to bring this to the table, because we need to say to each one what you expect from them, what you're supposed to do. Because one of the things that I hear a lot in our daily activities is that, okay, security is not my responsibility. Okay, so who will be the responsible one? I'm transferring the accountability to another person. So again, we're talking about accountability again. But yeah, so basically we need to also ensure the multidisciplinary teams, right? Because, okay, I don't have someone that is good in cybersecurity, is not good in pen testing, he cannot find vulnerabilities the way that it's supposed to be. But then what can I do in order to create a process? And we're going back again to process and in culture and governance, because I think it's all related with that. And we need to make it very clear since the beginning, because what I see is that most of the times the teams, they are lost. A lot of people, they don't know what they are doing, and they also don't know what to expect from the team itself, right? And the roles are not very well defined, and what you're supposed, because we are so overloaded and so overwhelmed in delivering things fast and building the functionalities, building the features, and crossing things, putting one thing against the other and in front of the other. And this can cause a lot of confusion, like Alan said, and it can be a mess. So I think the first thing would be organizing this and organizing the process. I think the key part to make this happen is going through this.
Yeah, part of what you said dovetails actually almost perfectly with my next question. When you mentioned the multidisciplinary nature of teams, that's important to ensure these processes flow smoothly. And because Brian, I was going to ask you, with the way things are evolving here with DevSecOps and just the automation and the acceleration of roles, of traditional roles, and the requirements within those roles, how does that reshape what the skills that professionals need to stay employable? How should individuals and organizations rethink learning and upskilling, career progression, and all of these things with all this stuff happening? Yes, here you go.
Great, thank you. It's interesting because AI is a tool like anything else, right? And I remember when I went to school, I'm aging myself here, I didn't have the internet. I had encyclopedias I had to work from, right? So I think from that perspective, for education specifically, and what we're doing at Centennial is we're looking at how do you support organizations to upskill their staff, to understand how to use AI. But I think, again, as we've said already, this is about people and AI is a tool. So specifically, I think you need a strategy around how your organization is going to employ AI in the organization. What are your standard operating procedures to do that? And then understand what the gap is between what your staff has now and what your staff needs. And I think a lot of organizations are struggling in certain areas or certain industries around how they can leverage AI. And that's one of the things we're partnering with Brainworks on, is how do we actually approach AI from an industry specific area so we can help, or for example, transportation organizations or healthcare organizations understand how they can leverage that tool. But I think it is, again, about the culture, and it is a leadership question. I really like your point, Simon, around the fact that you don't have to be a technical expert to understand how the team can leverage AI. And a lot of schools have struggled with this also around how do students leverage AI, and is it allowed in the classroom or not allowed in the classroom, right? And because it is a tool that they can use. So I think that's interesting, is it is one of those things like the internet, like to think about anything like that as a tool, and what are the guidelines to do that, and what skills of the future do your team need across all the roles and responsibilities on the team to leverage the tool appropriately.
Thank you so much. Pehochi, I'm going to move to you because I've got a similar question to a theme that's come up a few times, but I'd like to see if you can tackle it more from a risk and governance perspective. And it's sort of around how, with AI empowering so many different changes so much more quickly and faster than before, but also creating more vulnerability How do you set up the right safeguards to ensure that developers fully understand the code they deliver? Because it can have such negative consequences on an organization and beyond if it's not done properly. So from more of a governance and risk perspective, what can a company do?
Hi, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon to try to explain a little bit more about how cybersecurity and AI work together. But before anything, I think it's important to understand where we are right now related to organizations and companies. We saw the last days that Oracle fired around 10,000 employees worldwide in order to become an AI company. But why? Why did that happen? Because, of course, AI empowered the company, empowered people. So the users, the end users now, they have the power to deploy easily code. So this is why that's what we are talking about. However, taking the link from people from Portugal, we need soft skills. I was 3 weeks ago. I was in an event in United States called SXXW in Austin, and there was an explanation of how we will work with AI. We are pilots of agents, so don't let the AI become our leader. We have to lead the technology. We have to be empowered of that, not take them as granted and leave everything to AI to decide for us. So the last decision should be human. So I have some notes here that are based on what we're discussing right now, but more than 80% of the infractions, they are related to human errors. So the human factor is something really important in all the procedure and all security process regarding AI deployment. So trainment is something very, very, very important. So just not leave people to just code based on their expectations or their convictions about that. But trainment, I think it's something really, really, really important to deploy and to have secure codes. One key expression I always love to use when I was in a project is trust but verify. So always do a double check. We have several environments when we are in a deployment procedure. So we have the deployment environment. So after that, we have the test environment. After that, we have the homologation environment. And after that, you have the production. So we have, before the production, before a code goes directly to a production, we have 3 environments of test before anything. So have this procedure, the process of coding and the process of testing it is so much important than just write the codes. This is to avoid what? Do you remember the CrowdStrike effect that became the reality in 2024? What happened with the CrowdStrike effect in July 2 years ago? It was an update of CrowdStrike, just an update, and nobody tested it. So it was already from deployment to production. So everybody got the last homologated update and already sent it to the production environment, and a blackout happened in airports, ports, banks, and everywhere. Even my wife was working, and suddenly all the systems stopped. So it was a worldwide strike based on a simple error of procedure. So if you have a test procedure and how to deploy it, it's a procedure. It's not difficult to introduce this policy. So deploy, test, homologation, and then the production. And there is we are talking in Canada, so we have people from Canada. One of the most important methodologies worldwide used for security is a Canadian teacher called Anne Cavoukian that introduced to us the methodology of security by design and privacy by design. What's this? It's to use security and use privacy tools and privacy methodology since the beginning of the project. Not deploy everything and then at the end try to introduce security in the development. So this is a methodology from the early beginning of 2000s. So it's around 20 years of this methodology is used in deployment in everywhere. So it's not new, but of course, now we have AI, we have something different. We have a new technology that empower ourselves, empower the technicians, empower the users, empower the deployment team. So since we have a new equipment, a new tool, we have to understand that malware can be inserted during the code deployment right now. So this is something that the hackers use to do sometimes, is to add a small piece of the code, a malware inside the code, and then when it goes online, you have this malware maybe hijacking or maybe kidnapping data, and you can lose all your job and all your deployment strategy if you don't check. So that's what I said at the beginning. If you don't have the soft skills, you don't have at the last word a person to review all the procedures and to test it, the chance to fail is almost 100%.
Okay, great. Thank you. So verifying, testing, it's the perennial arms race, right? The defense has to keep up with the attackers, and it's just a cyclical challenge. I wanted to pick up on something that you mentioned at the beginning, because I've heard it a few times here, and maybe I could ask this question to everyone on the panel. And it's about the soft skills and the human skills, because again, it's something that we've talked about a lot. But how do you really train that? How do you get people to, like, what is soft skills? What is soft skills when it comes to the proper use of a technology? And if it is as important as people are saying, what can an organization or an institution do, like genuinely do, to help people develop these soft skills, these human skills, so that they can properly manage these tools that are posing significantly more challenges to day-to-day life with organizations? So I'll open that up to the panel. I don't know if you want to take a first stab at it.
Sure, I will, for sure. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Simon. So one of the things, I teach university part-time, and one of the things I see in my students is communication is an opportunity for, because they're so used to being on their phones. I remember I had 2 teenage daughters. I remember them all having friends over, and I look around the table and they're all on their phones, but they're at my house socializing with each other. So one of the things I think is important, and I look at these as power skills, so skills of the future, is I do think along the way, because of technology, people have lost the ability to communicate face to face, to have tough conversations. To the team Porto's point of view also around creating a culture, right? And I think that's really important. So I do think that communication is a skill in context. Teamwork. So again, you can sit at your desk and code all day, to Igor's point, but again, how is that getting done? What is the reason for that? And also, how do you communicate that and your updates with your team? So I do think that these power skills of the future that we're looking at are things like communication, collaboration is really important. Presence, being able to present. So I've had students that come up in front of me in my teaching, and they're looking at their phone while they're presenting. They're not looking at the audience. And I always coach them, they need to like really have cue cards or something to refer to, but not to be actually looking at their technology and reading off their technology. So I do think communication is key. I do think a lot of that is also coaching. It's not just about training. So it's also about coaching in the moment and coaching your team members. When you see an opportunity where they've communicated differently, or when they're doing something well when it comes to communication. So I think that's really important, because again, in our matrix type organizations, we are all working cross-functionally with different teams, and communication is one of the most important skills. And I do think there's an opportunity for skills of the future is to look at how you communicate in context of teamwork. That's one thing I would say for sure.
Anyone want to add to that? Maybe from an organizational perspective, or like professional development, training, specific coaching, mentorship.
I would like just to add that through the mentoring and coaching perspective, something that we currently are facing on the current generation is to create trust and empathy. It's something that we are human beings struggle sometimes to get at, and through the technology, through the way that current developers works, sometimes remotely, don't build relationships, don't create trust, don't get empathy, and that's results sometimes on the lack of accountability, which is something very crucial, for which some of the folks here said. It's about how we're going to be responsible for a code that AI written and someone deployed. Is that how many people are involved on that, or who should be responsible? So taking consideration that a soft skill that really matters on my understanding is trustworthy on the teams. When we have a team that the individuals trust themselves, everything, despite of the technology, goes much better.
I will just add one thing. Sorry if I'm being repeated. It's because, guys, one thing that I need to share with you, when I learned to align expectations, a lot of things changed my life. So I really think that this is one of the keys to solve it, because when you are building a team and when you are trying to implement something to develop soft skills like we're trying to discuss here, is we need to ask if the person is willing to give what we want them to give. Because if they're not ready, or and we cannot expect, because this person is not willing to, because I don't know, there's other stuff, other problems that we cannot solve it. Mm-hmm. It's pointless. Okay, I think we're just going to waste energy, and it's better to remove maybe this person from the team and get another one that will be more aligned with the expectations that we have at the moment, than trying to pursue this path. So I really believe that one of the most important tools that we need to use in order to develop these soft skills with our team is starting to make the alignment of expectations and start to ask people what they can give, and if it's aligned with what I expect them to give. Mm-hmm. I think that's
the commitment.
Yeah, right? It comes back to cultural fit as well, right? Sorry,
exactly.
Yeah.
No. Just saying that that's sounds like the when you commit something, when you have everything set, things tends to go better, to go good.
Yeah, for sure. Everyone has to be on the same page, right? Totally agree.
Yeah.
We got an interesting question come in from Porto that I think it's a decent time to ask, just because we've got some partners here who are in the supply chain world. And the question is, what do you foresee in the universe of AI regarding supply chain attacks? Because we've seen vulnerabilities to supply chain over the past few years, and we're seeing an increasing number of active targeted attacks on supply chains throughout the world. And so from the perspective of the conversations we've been having, what do you think going to happen? What do you think people can do? What do you think are going to be some of the vulnerabilities? How do people mitigate against that risk? We've got Level Group with us who focus a lot on supply chain. I don't know if there are any thoughts. Anybody want to take that?
I can share something from my side here. And also going back to my first comment where like the AI, we now can produce 10 times, 100 times the amount of code. This is the same for the hackers, right? And also one thing to think is that before the AI era, the hackers and people trying to attack infrastructure, they were limited by a single thing, which is their ability to construct, to craft software that's effective to do exploits, right? And now they are no longer limited to that. Even a hacker that just started their career, a young hacker, right, that was still learning Python to create their first exploit, now they can use Cloud and any other technology to simply build the most complex and ever beautiful built software ever. So I think this has a big play here in the amount of supply chain attacks that we are having. The second thing, I believe it's also not related to AI directly, but related to cloud in general, and all the, not cloud specifically, but all the CI/CD providers that now have the option to run stuff inside of the environment. For example, GitHub have GitHub Actions, and each provider will have a similar technology where you can really do CI/CD in someone else's infrastructure, and this is also an attack vector, right? So all this combined has brought to us the amount of supply chain attacks that we are seeing. Just in March, I believe, we had at least 3 or 4 major supply chain attacks. One that started everything was the Trivia attack, and that was also both of the things that I'm saying. First of all, it's CI/CD that's running on GitHub infrastructures, not self-hosted in this case. So really, pretty much anyone can just go there and do something that will exploit keys or credentials or stuff like that. And also we had a lot more related to, again, theft of credentials, like, for example, the one related to the Lite LLM, which is a router for AI. Basically, you can use a single library and have the library picks like the backend for you. I like to say that this is the OpenTelemetry collector for the AI era, pretty much removing the vendor lock-in portion of it, allowing you to quickly change from one SDK to other. So I believe with all this together, 2026 will be the year of the supply chain attack, including we have now teams, hacker teams that are specialized on that. So all these attacks that I mentioned here, they are backed by an organization called Team PCP, which is behind all these attacks. And they are also generating a lot of money out of this, right? So all you need pretty much is money to pay your AI subscription and ability to craft code to exploit more and more projects. And as a last bit, I will also mention about the open source system and ecosystem in general, which I think has a big portion on this, because open source right now, it's pretty much backed by people good deal, right? People just want to do good for others and help, and there's no money and incentive, there's no organization behind all those open source softwares, and the hackers started to see this as an attack vector. So for example, one attack that happened as well a couple months ago was the attack on the XeUtils library, which is a very low level library behind Linux. And just for you to know like how this happened, a guy started to contribute on the project and kept contributing for 2 years until he became a maintainer. So until that point was all regular activity, just someone being good for other people in the world, creating open source software. And then out of nowhere, this guy simply introduced a payload there, a malicious payload that started to hijack a lot of information. And I would say more, if that wasn't caught like quickly as it was by I think it was Microsoft, that could be one of the worst cybersecurity breaches in all the story of cybersecurity. So I think all those points together will bring to us as 2026 is, and the next years having a lot of supply chain attacks.
I would just like to...
Go ahead.
May I? Okay. Simon, it's a very good question about supply chain. And in a supply chain standpoint, here we used to make a squad to address not only to the not only the people, the technical people who is creating AI agents, but also the people, the professionals, people specializing in supply chain theme. The challenge here, I see, it's not only training and developing these people, mainly technical people, to avoid some risks on development phase, but also to add some agents that because we are in a agent time, then add the agents to make the recheck, the quality assurance on the code to avoid or to help to lower the risk of the code is infected with malware, for instance. Then what we see, not only the squad that join people looking at supply chain application and also the code developer or agents, the developers of agents, but also use the agents to apply this, to avoid this risk or mitigate this risk.
Just let me add some points here. It's really important, is what I said. It's not only use the technology and have the power of technology in our hands. So we must have people that know how to work and how to make decisions, because the strategic, all the strategic ideas and the projects come from people. And after that, after you have the strategy, then you can operate it in AI's agents. So the most important thing is to have people that know how to use the technology. So trainment is the key thing for deployment, for users, for companies, is how to deal and how you will use our minds, because it's like a cooking class, you know. You have all the ingredients. So we have, but you must have a chef, and the chef is us. So you have the pilots, and you have to train the pilots how to use the technology and AI. And of course, after AI, another thing that's really important, it's don't have the false sense of security. If AI wrote it, it must be secure. No, not always. So always check it twice, 3 times, 4 times. And I have some, I have here, I printed something here just to present you. I don't know if you can see it, but it's written in Linus Torvalds has a phrase, very interesting phrase. A few years ago, he said, "Explaining is easy. Show me the code." Now it's the contrary. Now having the code is easy, but show me and explain how you did it. So it's the contrary right now. Understand?
Great, thank you. So for sure, the barrier to entry for attacks is lower than it's ever been. So I think we also here come back a little bit to culture as well, where to avoid human error, I think a lot of the vulnerabilities are easy exploits, exploiting human error. So I think there comes a period where organizations need to make sure that their people are using not just the technology, but just the basic day-to-days as they're going through their jobs to help avoid these attacks. We're sort of running low on time, but we have one other question from Toronto. And I don't know who wants to. Sorry, Alan, did you have something? Oh no. Is the DevOps pipeline becoming the key security control now that AI has, for the most part, become the developer? Right. I don't know if somebody wants to jump on that quickly. Is the DevOps pipeline becoming the key security control? Maybe rather than having a separate
now everybody can be a developer. That's a problem. But
I
since you
think
have
so.
a ChatGPT or any other sort of technology, now my son of 7 years old can be a developer. That's the problem. So if he's not well trained and to make the tests that are necessary to have a code, the precise code, and make all the assessment necessary to do that, so his code will not be secure. Of course, he's a 7 years old kid. But for us professionals, we must know that it's what I said. It's don't go to the false sense of security. Now, if AI wrote it, it must be secure. No, not necessarily. So try to focus on tests, homologation before anything. This is what I always say. I'm a cybersecurity teacher, so I always say to my colleagues, say, okay, don't trust. It's like don't trust anything. It's like, do you remember that X-Files movies? Trust no one. So that's the idea.
Fox Mulder.
Yeah, I would like to add something here in regards of this question and put that through the European perspective as well, because I mean when we are developing software, right? It sounds like the DevSecOps it's pretty much important in this modern world, right? For the new platforms and so on. But we get one step back and see the regulations like NIS2 on Cyber Resilience Act on Europe, which put some guardrails and also help to on the supply chains attacks, because when we are not alone anymore. We are mainly each company is part of an ecosystem which have a couple of suppliers and so on. So sometimes in some breaches that comes on these days come through our suppliers and not for ourselves, and sometimes. So we have recently a bunch of cases on that matter. So you have your own DevSecOps teams, everything's all running fine, but through a supplier, you can be attacked for some instance and have some outage on your environment, on your product, right? So I really think that we need to take a very good look at frameworks like NIST, like in other regulations, other than only doing the DevSecOps stuff, right? And look into the suppliers. Looking when for your suppliers is something key, because the attack can be through outside, right, from a partner.
Yeah, and I think specifically the question was also about how if security integrated more carefully into the DevSecOps pipeline rather than having a separate secure cybersecurity department, creating a bit of a silo or a bottleneck maybe. But we're out of time, unfortunately. We've got 2 minutes left, and I don't think we have time for another question. I do want to thank our panelists very much for contributing. I want to thank our guests for joining us. I do want to take this opportunity to a bit of a shameless plug, because Brainwork and Centennial College, this is the first time I've sort of talked about it publicly, have ventured into a partnership where we're going to be collaborating to offer training along the lines of a lot of the topics we've been talking about today. We're going to be working directly with organizations to create training and development on things like AI for DevSecOps and agentic AI and prompt engineering, AI and supply chain. So it's a really good opportunity for us, I think, to bridge the gap that we've been talking about and make sure that companies, organizations have the training they need to navigate this world. We're also going to be having these courses on a platform called Ontario Learn, which is a platform where there are 24 colleges and Indigenous institutions throughout the province that have courses available online. And so we're going to have a lot of our material there as well. So I think like I said at the beginning, I hope that really we can create a bit of an ecosystem. If people here who are joining us online and live in the 3 countries can connect with each other, connect with the panelists, and form some synergies, hopefully we can see the conversation continuing and maybe even some opportunities arise that way, and pursue strategic interests together. So we really appreciate everybody joining us today, our panelists and our guests. Yeah, and we're offering also we collaborated with CyberMe, Alan and his team, on the AI for DevSecOps that we know there's a lot of demand and need for this, hence this conversation today. So really appreciate everybody joining. We're going to have some networking here afterward. So I mean, anybody who's available to chat and get to know each other a little bit better, please do. I'm sure same goes in Porto and Sao Paulo. And we'll continue this discussion going. So thank you, everybody, for joining. And enjoy the rest of your day.
Awesome. Thank you, guys, for the opportunity.
Pleasure to be with you guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Keep
Thanks very much.
safe.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Vamos bater palma, né? Deu certo. Deu certo.